Today I'm going to show you how I turned this into this. Let's start with the scene first. Here we have our very inexperienced talent walking toward the window in the kitchen, a little sigh, hand in pocket, sipping their morning cup of joe, staring out the window, pondering all the things. I'm going to break the lighting down for both the wide and the medium into a 4-step process, with step number 1 being foundation. When I say foundation, I'm referring to the main light sources, those being the lights coming through these two windows on the left and right. And this light's going to be doing the majority of the heavy lifting here. Starting with the window on the right-hand side of the scene, I had two Aputure 300s. One was a 300X, the other is a 300D. We have hyperreflectors on both of them. Both lights were about 4 feet away from the window/door there, and I raised them up and then tilted them down almost 45 degrees. The sun wasn't low enough at this point of the day to give me enough light. The false color was reading way underexposed. So knowing this wouldn't work, I took a T4C, a 4-foot tube, put it outside on a C-stand at 100% and tried to throw that through the window just to give a little more light on my face. And surprise, surprise, didn't work. So I'll let you know what I did in the next step. Now I wanted a nice warm glow as if it's morning light coming through the window. So this is probably one of my favorite things to do, which is taking CTS, color temperature straw, and putting them either on the windows or on your lights. This is the most ghetto way to gel a window, by the way, but it worked for what I was trying to achieve here. The reason I wanted to gel the entire window as opposed to the light was because this was during the middle of the day and all the light that was coming through was really blue. So in order to fix that, I just went ahead and gelled the entire thing. Once the gels were in place, I tweaked the 300s just a little bit. I brought them closer together, also lowered them in height and increased the angle at which they were pointing down. I also had one pointing to the left, the other one to the right. That way it gave me a little more of an edge light when I was up by the sink looking out the window. If you find lighting breakdowns valuable like I do myself, subscribe to the channel because there's a lot more coming. You don't want to miss it. And let's get back to the video. Now that the foundation is set, that brings us to step 2, that being talent. Lighting the talent properly, getting more level on the face in this particular scene. On camera left, there's quite a bit of counter space and just room in general in that little corner. I was able to take a light stand in the T4C, hide it in that little corner where it wasn't being seen. There was a lot of light reflecting off the cabinet, and you could just tell that there was a light there. So I took a double net, rested it up against the cabinet, and that was doing just enough to cut that light on the bottom part of the cabinet. However, the top part of the cabinet was still reflecting too much light. So in order to flag that off, I took just some gaff tape and just taped that off and just used that basically as a flag. And that was giving me exactly what I wanted. That's all we had to do for step 2 for the wide. So now that brings us to step 3, that being the background and the set lighting. The first thing I did was took this really old 1K tungsten just because I needed more light, honestly. Then I took an acrylic mirror, I think it's a 2x3, put some lines across it with gaff tape and just clamped it straight up to the stand. So then I took this other tube that I have, it's a Godox something, I don't remember, I'll link it down below. But I had that, flagged it off with the barn doors to where it was just bouncing off the little gnome that's on there and the plant on the middle of the island. The last thing I wanted to do was add some sort of under and above cabinet lighting because we definitely don't have that. And in order to do that, I took just these small little panel lights. I think the ones that I have are made by LoomCube. Put some gaff tape on the bottom of them and then slapped them straight up both on the top and bottom of the cabinets. And that brings us to the last step, step 4, which is refinements. So you're looking at your scene, what can I fix and make better? And in my opinion, it's haze. With all that put together, that gives us this. So on the left side of the scene, you can see the light that's bouncing off that acrylic mirror that we had before. We also have a little bit of light beams that are coming through from the sun, the light that's keying our subject. And those light beams are because of the haze. They are really subtle. I wish they were a little punchier, but they do look good. We have the light that is above and below our cabinet, just to give some sort of visual interest and really something that's in there. And you can see that the gnome and the plant that are on the island aren't in a very sad, dark place. Overall, I think this one worked pretty well, so let's jump to the medium shot. For the medium, our foundation's already set, so that brings us to the second step, which is talent. So once the camera was set, I took the T4C on the same stand and everything it was on before, brought it directly behind me, and this is going to be my edge light. I then separated the 300s. 300D stayed in the window that it was previous. The other one moved over to where the sun was coming through, the key light, And just with the hyper reflector, this is what I got. It's not bad. However, I feel like the light coming through is a little too harsh, a little too sourcey. The specular highlights are a little too much for me on my face, so I wanted to soften it just a little bit. So here you can see some more professional rigging that I did. This is just a random piece of cloth that I found at Joann Fabrics when I was shopping for a short film I was doing. Bought a bunch of it because I thought it was fantastic. It only cuts maybe a little more than a half stop of light, but it softens it just enough to make it not as sourcey. So I thought it's great. And this is what it looks like with the cloth on. And then again, this is what it looks like without. So you can see a side-by-side comparison of the two. Last thing for talent lighting, I wanted to add a little more contrast. So I took my 4x floppy, brought it directly on camera right behind me to where it's out of frame, as close as possible. Step 3, background, I only made one small adjustment, and to be completely honest, I don't really know if it did anything. The one thing I did was take the acrylic mirror, brought it as close as possible, and tried to use that key light to bounce light onto the cabinet that's directly in the background. But I don't see it, but maybe you guys do, I don't know. And finally, refinement, you know what this means. We gotta bring out the haze again. And here are the results. We have a little bit of contrast, which is nice. Didn't want too much since it is a morning scene. The pattern that you see on my jacket is actually from the sun, which worked out absolutely perfect. You can see the T4C is lighting my hair just a little more than without any light at all. And there's still a little bit of glow of the light that's coming in through that door in the background there. And we still have the light that is underneath the cabinet just to give a little something in the background there. So what do you think of the results? Did you like them? What would you have done differently? Let's chat about everything down below in the comments. And if you like lighting breakdowns, check out another one right there.